Hello, I'm Anthony. About a week ago I made a video where I discussed a possible use case for Groove Agent acoustic styles. I basically chose the simplest drum rhythm I could find from the Studio SE kit. It's this preset permanently off. And by the end of that video, and I'll put a link to it above if you want to go and review the early stages of this piece, I basically had a template for what was going to be what has become this piece of music. I had a really simple bass line, a groove, and very little else, some extremely rough guitar and synth ideas that weren't sitting particularly well together. Anyway, we're at this stage now where we've got a final finished piece of music. We're going to have a look at the piece of music from the perspective of Groove Agent. I want to really try to maintain that as my focus, but basically just bearing in mind that there is a piece of music underneath. The first thing I want to do is zoom in and show you just how similar this line is to the one that was at the end of the last video, because sometimes a thing that's not broken doesn't need to be fixed. I had 4 or 5 minutes worth of music, a really nice drum rhythm with a bit of evolution. I had a drop somewhere in the middle. I call it a drop, it's not a drop. It was basically like a takedown in energy. This main 9 was lacking some snares, so I already had some dynamics, and I'd anticipated a build to some sort of crescendo at the end where I had fills going on. I used all of those things in the writing of the song, so I'm going to guide you through some of those decision moments now. We'll have a look at basically how this thing turned out. Now, we started out at the very beginning of the song with just the bass line, but I only wanted that, didn't want it to last for so long. 2 bars, and then immediately the drum rhythm comes in. Now this main 1, you can reference back to the previous video. I talked about a lot of features of that drum kit and said I'm not going to want main 1 to last for very long, if at all, because it's very, very straightforward. But it actually filled a perfect niche role for 2 bars just to get me up and running with the song. And this is nothing more than an intro. And then we have the first introduction of guitars. So it's very, very laid back. Now ultimately I know I'm going to want this piece of music to go somewhere else, but for the time being I want to develop very gently. So here's the first point where we split from what I wrote last time. I'd basically doubled every pattern. I'd thrown 2 copies of each 4-bar groove into Cubase. I literally just went up in ascending sequential number, and it happened that there was a kind of happy accident thing going on at main 9. But generally speaking, energy increases with complexity. It seemed a perfectly reasonable philosophy to impart into my song. But as I was getting up and running with this very slow introduction, there wasn't enough of this early part. I was getting to the active stuff too quickly. So I literally just added an extra 8 bars of project so that it had a little bit longer with which to develop this nice gentle introduction. New guitar line comes in, and the synths obviously. So the drums are absolutely underpinning everything that's happening here. An energy step up to main 4. And so we have the first really melodic guitar line, and then pull it back down again. So all of this is basically introduction. I know that I'm going to want to do something by the time I get here, but there's no rush. The difference between main 4 and main 5 is literally only the increase in energy from the drums. If you look at musically, this section of 8 bars, well, there's a new line coming in here, but at the moment, these 4 bars are identical to bars 29 to 33. Generally speaking, I don't like to be quite that linear in a song, to have no musical development, but I was really happy with that extra little step up in rhythm that we had from main 5. Everything that happened in this thing was me just slinging the guitar on, jamming along with this groove, really kind of getting into the groove, and just laying down really, really simple lines, and then finding out how to stack them together. I haven't done a thing with the bass line. Absolutely flat. New guitar line. So this is kind of like a call and response. There's two separate guitar lines here. The second one has an increase of energy. And I'm going to stop it here just so that I can talk about what happens when we finally hit the magical bar 53. We're going to go into that section where the energy leaks out of the drum kit because it has fewer snare hits. In fact, I've gone further. One of the changes that I've made and to one section of main 9, we've got 2 of them. In the 4-bar section starting at bar 53, you'll hear there are no snares or rims at all. I've taken them all out. So I've really dragged the energy of the drums down, and you'll hear quite a dramatic change in the guitar style as well. Pulled all of this gentle noodling stuff away, and we're moving into the second phase of the piece now. You'll also hear that I finally capitulated and changed the bass line. This bass line here is even simpler than the one I originally wrote. We'll eventually get back to line number 1. It's behind my head, but at bar 77 it goes back to the original line. When we get to bar 53, it's going to pull down even further, so there's very, very little music going on, and this is what we're going to get. Absence of snare, space. Sparse snare comes back. Big boost of energy at this point. The track's called Yes You Should for a reason. It's homage to one of my all-time favourite pieces of music. By a band called Hawkwind, called You Shouldn't Do That, from In Search of Space 1971, an unbelievable piece of music. And these backing tracks here, 4 and 5 is stereo, is basically my We're Not Worthy moment to that piece of music. This is where I always wanted and intended the piece of music to go. In the last video I said, you know, I can feel myself being taken over by the spirit of Hawkwind. I knew this is where I wanted to go, and I wanted to develop this idea in the middle of this energy drop. As we come back out of the drop, I want to start picking it back up again. Main 11 has recovered pretty much all of the energy that was lost. And it's an active rhythm again. And then suddenly, now we really can call this a drop. It's very rare that I throw the entire rhythm away. It was a complete whim that I tried it. For some inexplicable reason, it just felt like I needed to take everything away and let the guitars stand on their own. Now then, coming out of this, you've thrown all of your drums and your rhythm away. You've just done this hard disconnect from the previous part of the song. How are we going to get back in? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is bring the original bass line back, so that'll get me centered nice and comfortably where I used to be. But I want a new drum pattern. I'm going to throw this rhythm away. As you can see, it's called Fill 7 plus Intro 3. I've just realised I've not even played it to you yet. Let's hear what we've got in the piece. Okay, extended fill, that's what it's all about. I'll reconstruct that rhythm from scratch to show you how I did it. Don't want it too loud in the background. First thing to do is to audition all of the various drum rhythms. Now I'm not going to go through all 32 different alternative patterns, but we use follow transport for this kind of thing. Turn follow transport on, and the drum rhythm starts playing in the background without there being any MIDI data. You can now audition every drum pattern live. It's not going to take you long to go through them all and choose the ones you like. And that's exactly what I did. I went through all 32 patterns, the 16 variations of the main complexity, plus all of the fills, intros, and endings. I very quickly came to the conclusion that it was all about fills and intros, so that's where we ended up sticking. Every time I get to a good one, I write it down on my notepad. Now, as it turns out, there were only 2 grooves I actually wrote down, fill 7 and intro 3. They're only 1 bar long each, so at this point it probably behooves us to move down to a single bar. Let's have a listen to fill 7 in the first bar of this 2-bar reintroduction. It works really, really well. So having settled on that bar, fill 7, the only other thing I've written down on my notepad is intro 3. Let's have a listen to that in the second bar. If both of these bars work as standalone rhythms, I'm perfectly happy and I'm going to move on. So I'm mostly happy with that. I like the toms. There's one crash that I don't like. So I'm going to drag these 2 grooves into Groove Agent and fix that one little thing about it that I don't like. So here's intro 3, going into the second bar, and then fill 7 in the first bar. The perils of spending too much time making a video and not enough time listening to what you're doing. Basically just recorded about 10 minutes of this video without turning follow transport on. So I was playing loads of different examples of different grooves, completely failing to appreciate that everything had intro 3 playing in the background as well. Oh, Anthony, turn follow transport off. Groove Agent will play whatever you've got selected if follow transport is on. I just got done. Okay, back to the example. Here we've got the new fill 7 plus intro 3. I'm going to rename it. And we're nearly there. This is the one part in the entire groove where I'm going to do some manual editing. Let's just listen to the thing as it is. One single crash hit I don't like. Let's go in and edit it. That crash is in the wrong place. I want it to be on 76.3. I don't like that offbeat. I want it to be absolutely consistent. I'm going to pick it up and move it. And I don't mind that it's a little bit anxious here. You can see the note slightly before the beat. That's completely fine. That's what I want. Now the problem that I've got is that those 3 crashes are all using the same symbol. They're all using crash B. Well, we've got another crash symbol available to us here that's not being utilised. Now at the moment I'm in Show Drum Sounds with Events. We can't see crash A. If you're using the drum editor, it's a little bit tricky. What you need to do is switch to In Use by Instrument, and then go and find your original crash. There it is. Find crash A, which is down on C#2. Basically just arrow down with your keyboard. And let's have a listen to that. Great stuff. So now we've come out of the break and we're fully up and running again. As you can hear, we've reverted back to the original bass line. We've maintained that consistency of that distorted guitar in the background. So we've got a real kind of seamless link between the two. But by reintroducing the original bass line, which we haven't heard for a minute or so, we've got a brand new feeling to the song. Let's have a look at it from the perspective of Groove Agent though. Really want this to be a Groove Agent centric video. This combination of intros and fills was done last week. I'd selected intro 4 and fill 7 as my favourite articulations to add to this groove. And as you can see, for the most of the remaining part of this piece, they're going to do that and that alone. Right at the very end of the song, we've got something new. We'll talk about that in a moment. Just to talk about the increase of energy over the couple of minutes as this piece comes to its conclusion. It's basically an ever-accumulating amount of energy. By the time we get to the end, if I jumped right to the end, it would be something of a cacophony because there's so much going on. I'm just going to dive in right now and you'll hear there's an awful lot. It's a very, very busy piece. Lots of different counter melodies playing against each other. This is something that I just like to do. This is one of my personal preferences. If you start off with not many of those things, right back at bar 77, we've got a fairly simple guitar line. There's not much going on, and you introduce one new thing at a time and give your ear 4 or 8 bars to get used to it. It's amazing how much stuff you can stack on top of each other, and it just sounds bigger and bigger and more grandiose, I suppose. This is one of the styles of music that I absolutely love to do. Right at the end of the piece, the drums kind of fall short of the rest of the energy of the song. They've been doing their thing for a while, the 8-bar cycle, and I wanted to introduce something new. So I went back into follow transport mode. I'm going to solo it so that we can just listen to the groove. It's the standard main 8 plus intro 4 fill 7, that 8-bar loop, exactly as was. And then using follow transport, I auditioned all of the grooves in Groove Agent that had a ride cymbal. Now, if we just listen to main 13, which is the one I ended up selecting, I'll just press play. That constant ride cymbal is what I wanted, and main 13 is the only one that gives you that really stable, constant ride cymbal. You know what? I'm going to do it. It won't take long to replicate. Start with our original groove, glue those together. That's where my misnaming came from. I'm going to drag main 13 out into Cubase. It'll create a new track. I don't particularly care where it's going because I'm going to put it on a lane of the original track. It's only a 4-bar groove, don't care. Duplicate it, that's absolutely fine. And then now that it's on a lane of the same track, I can select both of those MIDI parts and bounce them together. And that's how you merge grooves. It's one of the many ways that you can merge grooves very easily. Now we've got a problem with this groove if we do it this way. If I zoom in really tight, I should be able to find an example fairly easily. There's one. 2 kicks from different grooves, almost coexistent, not actually coexistent, but almost. That's a problem. You don't want those 2 notes. So if you ever merge grooves together, you're going to get this issue, particularly with stuff that's been played live because you're not absolutely on the bar. I have a macro for exactly this purpose. It's called delete loose doubles. If you want to take a screenshot, you can see the algorithm for it. I've also made this available to my patrons and channel members. So if you actually want to download my macros exactly as is, you can. But when I execute this command, let's zoom in again. There they are. Delete loose doubles will do a temporary quantize, then a delete doubles, and then undo the quantize. Watch one of these notes disappear. There we go. Now this groove has been thinned, and only one example of any groove survives. If you've got really, really fast rhythms, you might need to tighten up your quantize. That was done to 30 seconds and it's worked perfectly well. So now this groove is the composite of those 2 different grooves patched together. What I'm essentially getting is the ride over the top. A few extra hats have been added in, but it's all good. It's just adding that extra energy to the groove. This is probably too much, but it's not doing any harm. And in the context of the song, absolute madness ensues. In the words of Greg Kinnear, as good as it gets, this is not a subtle point you're making. And this is all about pomp and bombastic, kind of over-the-top sound. That was an itch I needed to scratch. This piece definitely scratched it. And that's how I used the Acoustic Agent groove to help me write this piece of music. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit like if you did. I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.